I pulled into my sister's driveway on a cool late September afternoon. The kind where the air feels still and expectant, like it is holding its breath for whatever comes next. I had driven over straight from work in downtown Milwaukee, still in my blazer, still with my laptop bag in the back seat, telling myself this visit would be simple. One day before Evelyn's wedding, one quick check-in, one last sister moment before everything in her life shifted. It was strange how hopeful I still was, even after all these years of drifting apart. I stepped inside without knocking, because that was how we used to be. Back when we were two girls clinging to each other after losing our parents in a winter accident that shattered everything. Back then, Evelyn was all I had left. I used to tell myself I was all she had left, too. Her living room was filled with garment bags, fresh flowers, and the faint smell of hairspray. Evelyn stood in front of a long mirror in her guest room, still in jeans, but wearing the bodice of her wedding gown, her hair pinned into a loose updo. She looked radiant in that effortless way she always had, the kind that made people naturally fall in line behind her. Yet when she saw me in the doorway, her shoulders tightened just a little. I moved closer, offering to help smooth the fabric where it wrinkled near her hip. It had once been natural for me to slip into the role of helper, fixer, little sister, who made everything easier. I had spent my whole life doing that for her, long after most people stopped needing help from anyone. She let me tug gently on the skirt to adjust the hem. I knelt to straighten the layers, and as I did, she looked down at me with a smile so calm and cold, it made the back of my neck prickle. She said in a bright, almost playful tone that did not match her eyes, that the greatest gift for her wedding would be me disappearing from our family. For a moment, I thought I misheard her. My hands froze on the fabric. The room felt smaller, the air suddenly too thin. Behind her, Gavin stepped into view. He was 35, handsome in that perfectly groomed, athletic way, wearing a fitted button-down and the same customer service grin he gave everyone. Even now, it looked practiced, like something he kept in his pocket and clipped on whenever he needed to charm someone. He rested a hand on Evelyn's shoulder with casual ownership. He said I should not take it personally, that big life events bring out tensions and expectations, and that I often misread things. He said this as if I were a child who needed to calm down before she embarrassed herself. I rose slowly from the floor. My heart was thudding, but not hurt the way it used to. Something else was moving inside me. Something quiet and sharp. I told Evelyn I did not understand. She laughed softly under her breath, as if the question itself annoyed her, then said that I had a way of clouding her energy, that I always brought complications to events that were supposed to be joyful. She said it was her time now, her turn, to build a life that was hers alone, not one tied to old grief or obligations. Obligations. That word landed harder than her earlier jab, because I remembered another time when she said she did not want obligations. I remembered standing in a tiny condo in Racine, the condo that had belonged to our mom, the condo I had spent 2 years renovating after college with money I saved from every freelance job I could get. Evelyn had cried when I gave it to her as a gift, telling me she wanted her own space, but still wanted to feel close to family. I had been 29 then. Overworked but proud, thinking that starting fresh together was the right thing. I reminded myself of that memory as I looked at her now. She had wanted that condo so badly. She had promised to take care of it, to treat it as a stepping stone toward a better future for both of us. Then Gavin came along, and everything started shifting. I asked her quietly if she truly wanted me gone, if she truly believed I was standing in the way of her happiness. Gavin spoke before she could answer. He stepped forward just enough to block a portion of her reflection in the word mirror. He said Evelyn deserved peace on her big day, and that sometimes family members caused problems without meaning to. He said that I tended to stir things up. He even mentioned a time years ago when I suggested Evelyn take a job she hated, and he framed it like it was proof that I always complicated her life. Evelyn nodded along to every word he said. I realized then that the sister I loved was not standing in front of me anymore. Or maybe she was, but buried under layers of insecurity and influence I had never noticed, creeping in. I whispered that if she truly wanted me out of her life, she should say it herself instead of letting Gavin translate her feelings. She finally looked at me with impatience and said that if I really loved her, I would give her the one gift she asked for and step away quietly. Something in me hardened. I walked out of the room without slamming the door, without crying, without pleading. It was the first time in my life I chose silence instead of apology. As I moved down the hallway, I heard Gavin's low voice telling her he knew this would happen, that I always made things about me. Evelyn murmured something I could not hear. I stepped outside into the cool evening. The sun was sinking behind the houses, turning the street gold. I stood by my car for a long moment, letting the chill settle into my skin. I thought about how many times I had forgiven her for thoughtless words, for taking me for granted, for pushing me aside whenever someone new entered her life. Not this time. If she wanted me gone, I would give her exactly what she asked for. As I pulled away from her house, the sun slipping behind the rooftops, I felt that same hollow ache I used to feel on the nights I pretended. Everything was fine, just to keep our little family from breaking apart. And maybe that is why I remember every second of that drive home so clearly. What were you doing the last time someone made you feel small, or unwanted, or invisible in your own family? When this moment happened to me, I was gripping the steering wheel on I-94, trying to steady my breath and make sense of how a sister could slice me open with one sentence. If you are listening to this right now, I would truly love to know where you are and what you are doing, because stories like ours always seem to find people at the exact moment they need them. Back home, I kicked off my heels and sat at my dining table, still in my work clothes. My laptop was already open from that morning. A new email notification blinked on the screen. It was from my attorney, confirming the annual property record summary of the condo I had once given Evelyn. I stared at it for a full minute before clicking it open. The document listed me as the sole owner. Not joint, not transferred, not pending. Exactly as it had been years ago before I handed her the keys and told her it was hers. My chest tightened, but not with sadness, with clarity. I whispered to the empty room that if the gift I gave them was such a problem, then I would take it back in a way they would never forget. And that was the moment everything began to shift. That was the moment the revenge I never thought I was capable of started, taking shape without me even realizing it. I closed the laptop slowly, letting the weight of the realization settle, and the chapter of my old self slipped quietly behind me. I did not know then what I would do next, only that I would not stay silent anymore. I closed the laptop slowly, letting the weight of that realization settle, and for a long moment, I just sat there in my quiet dining room. The only sound, the faint hum of the refrigerator. A part of me wanted to get up and run a hot shower, wash away the whole evening, scrub off Evelyn's words until my skin burned. But another part of me, a deeper part, kept me still. It felt like something inside me was shifting, turning, revealing pieces of myself I had ignored for too many years. Maybe that is why the memories came back so quickly. They rose up like they had just been waiting for me to stop pretending. Everything was fine. I was 17 when our parents died. It was a February morning, one of those bitter Wisconsin days when the sky looks like it is pressed down, too close to the earth. I remember standing outside the emergency room at St. Luke's Hospital with numb fingers and a police officer trying to explain what had happened. I remember the way Evelyn walked in a few minutes later, snow still in her hair, and pulled me into her coat before anyone told her a thing. She was 20 then, barely an adult herself, but she said she would take care of everything. Everyone praised her for being strong, for stepping up, for keeping our family together. No one saw the other side. In private, she would look at me with this tightness around her mouth, like I was something she had been forced to carry up a hill that never stopped climbing. She never said I ruined her life, not out loud, but the message came through anyway, in all the small ways. The sighs when she had to sign my school forms, the way she tossed her keys onto the table and said she could not go out with her classmates because she had to check on me. The nights she reminded me that she had dreams too, dreams she had put aside for me. Back then, I tried so hard not to be a burden. I cooked dinners, helped clean, studied until my eyes hurt, and worked part-time at a coffee shop even though my grades were the only thing I thought might ever make her proud. I kept waiting for the moment she would look at me and see someone worth loving, not someone who needed managing. When I got accepted into a good college on a scholarship, Evelyn congratulated me in front of everyone. She told our aunts and neighbors how proud she was, how she always knew I would shine. Then, later that night, she accused me of leaving her behind, of moving on without her, of making her the one who would be all alone. She cried in a way that made me feel guilty for wanting to breathe air that was just mine. I carried that guilt for years, even after graduation. Even after getting my first job as an IT project coordinator, I kept trying to make things easier for her. She always found ways to remind me how much she had sacrificed, how much she had given up for me. And I believed her. For a long time, I believed every word. Maybe that is why I started renovating the condo Mom left behind. I found the old key tucked in a shoebox of her things when I was packing for college. It was a small place in Racine, a little outdated, but it had her handwriting on the deed. I fixed it up slowly over 2 years, ripping up carpets, painting walls on weekends, sanding cabinets until my arms shook. I wanted it to be a place where Evelyn and I could start fresh, where the pain of losing our parents could become something softer if we just lived inside those walls long enough. And for a while, it worked. When I brought her there after finishing the kitchen, she stood in the doorway looking stunned. She hugged me tight and told me no one had ever loved her like I did. I held on to that sentence like it was the last warm thing in the world. When Gavin came along a year later, everything shifted again. I barely noticed it at first. He seemed charming, attentive, the kind of man who liked being seen as a rescuer. Evelyn fell for him fast, and I was happy for her, truly. She deserved joy after everything she had carried. But somewhere along the way, she began talking about independence, about wanting a home that was solely hers. She said the condo made her feel tied down to old memories, that she needed space to grow with Gavin. I told her she should take it, make it whatever she needed, build a new life in it. At the time, it felt like the right thing to do. I was proud of giving it to her. Proud of helping her find stability, proud of believing our bond was stronger than any resentment she used to hold. It took me a long time to realize she had never given me a place in her new life with him. I was someone she thanked politely in front of others, but someone she kept at arm's length when it mattered. She would cancel plans with me because Gavin did not like certain restaurants. She would ask me to keep quiet about my promotions at work because Gavin felt insecure about his career path. She would tell me I was lucky not to have real responsibilities, even though I was leading teams, managing projects, and working overtime during system launches. Evelyn always made my accomplishments feel like something I should hide. I leaned back in my chair and rubbed my eyes, trying to steady the ache behind them. Maybe that was why tonight hurt less than it should have. It was not a knife out of nowhere. It was a blade that had been pressed in slowly over years, so deep that when it finally cut through, all I felt was a strange clarity. Still, something about today had bothered me more than just her words. Something smaller, more subtle. I opened my phone and scrolled through old messages. Months ago, Evelyn used to text me pictures of wedding ideas, venues, color palettes. She had asked me whether she should choose blush roses or ivory ones. Then the messages shifted. She started asking if she could borrow money for deposits, always promising she would return it once the final payments came through. She said planning a wedding was overwhelming, that she and Gavin were juggling accounts, that it was temporary. But I remembered what happened earlier this week when I mentioned the rising cost of weddings. She went pale, shut down the conversation, said everything was handled, and she did not want to talk numbers. She'd always been a little dramatic about finances, but this felt different. This felt like someone hiding something. I stared at the ceiling. Maybe the condo was part of it. Maybe she was using it in ways she never told me about. Maybe Gavin had something to do with the nervous way she kept glancing at him, in front of me, like she was waiting for him to approve her words. I shook my head. I needed a clear mind, not spirals. I needed sleep, though I knew that was impossible tonight. Outside, the street was quiet. The kind of quiet that settles over a suburban neighborhood after 10 in the evening, where porch lights glow, and everyone else's life seems peaceful from there. Outside, my life had never felt peaceful, but tonight it felt like it was bracing for impact. I walked to the window and looked out over the yard. My reflection in the glass looked older than 33. Not tired exactly, but aware. Finally aware. Something was wrong with Evelyn. Something was wrong with the way she reacted to the mention of money. Something was wrong with the way she leaned into Gavin as if he were the one, thinking for both of them. And if there was one thing I knew after surviving the chaotic years after losing our parents, it was that trouble never arrived quietly. It always started with shadows under a door, whispers in a hallway, the sound of something cracking long before it broke. I stepped away from the window and sat back at the table, opening the email again. The condo was still legally mine. If Evelyn had been using it for something she should not, tomorrow would reveal it. I brushed my fingers over my phone, thinking about texting her, demanding answers, forcing a conversation. But I had done that too many times in the past, only to be told I was overthinking, overreacting, exaggerating. Not this time. This time I wanted truth, not reassurance. And truth has a way of showing up when you stop chasing it. I closed the laptop again, this time with purpose. The night felt heavy, and yet there was a strange steadiness in my chest. I could feel the old guilt slipping away, layer by layer, leaving space for something stronger. Tomorrow, I told myself, I would find out what Evelyn was hiding. I did not know how far the truth would reach, only that the quiet warning signs were finally too loud to ignore. I went to bed that night with my mind running in restless circles, and when morning came, I knew I was not going to get any clarity sitting alone in my house staring at unanswered questions. Evelyn's wedding rehearsal dinner was scheduled for that evening at a lakeside restaurant in Cedar Grove, and even though the thought of seeing her again made my stomach twist, I knew I needed to be there. If something was wrong, if something bigger was happening behind the scenes, I would catch a glimpse of it among the smiles and champagne toasts. Secrets always find a way of slipping out at gatherings, especially ones wrapped in celebration. All day at work, I kept getting distracted. I was supposed to finish preparing a project outline for a system update our team was deploying the following week, but my thoughts drifted constantly to Evelyn and Gavin. Every time I tried to focus, an image flashed in my mind of Evelyn's face last night. Pale and tight, the corners of her mouth drawn in like she was holding her breath. Around 2 p.m, I stepped away from my desk to refill my water bottle. As I walked past the elevator, I overheard 2 of my coworkers chatting about relationships and finances. One of them laughed and said her husband handles all their accounts, and she never sees the bills. It was meant to be a lighthearted joke, but it hit me the wrong way. I thought of Gavin at the bridal shop last month, how he hovered around Evelyn when she tried to pay for her alterations. He had nudged her hand away from her purse and told the clerk he would handle it. Evelyn laughed then, but there was no joy in it. The more I replayed recent memories, the more uneasy I became. Gavin always grabbed his phone the second it buzzed, even mid-sentence. He never left it face down on the table like most people did. He kept it in his hand, screen pointed away from everyone, especially Evelyn. She once told me he had added a complicated passcode because he traveled for work and needed extra security. At the time, it seemed normal enough, but now it felt suspicious. And there was that afternoon 3 months ago when a woman I had never seen before showed up at my office reception asking for me. She said she needed to ask a question about someone named Gavin Rhodes. I remember blinking in surprise because she looked anxious, almost frantic. But before I could even get her name, she received a phone call and hurried out. Back then, I assumed she had the wrong person, or maybe it was some bizarre misunderstanding. It did not feel like a misunderstanding now. I usually tried to keep out of Evelyn's romantic life, but as I gathered my things to leave work early and head to the rehearsal dinner, I felt an urgency I could not ignore. Something was wrong. And if Evelyn would not tell me, then I would have to look for the cracks myself. The venue sat right on the water, with large windows facing the lake. The early evening sun glowed orange over the surface. People mingled on the patio, and the waitstaff moved briskly between tables. It should have been beautiful, and maybe it was for everyone else, but my nerves made the whole place feel slightly off balance, like a painting hung crooked on a wall. I spotted Evelyn near the bar, surrounded by her bridesmaids. She was smiling, but it was the hollow kind that never touched her eyes. When she saw me, she gave the smallest nod, the kind of acknowledgement you might give a distant acquaintance, not a sister. Gavin was across the room, talking loudly with 2 of his groomsmen. When he caught sight of me, He walked over with that polished grin. He asked if I was ready to take on my role tomorrow, his tone dripping with that same condescension he had used last night. I told him I knew exactly what my role was. He chuckled like I was being dramatic and said I had a habit of making simple things more complicated than they needed to be. I wanted to ask him why he always snatched his phone so quickly when it buzzed. I wanted to ask him where he had been the night Evelyn called me crying, 2 weeks ago, saying she felt alone in her own relationship. I wanted to ask him who the woman at my office was and why she had known his full name. But I kept my mouth shut because Evelyn was walking toward us. She touched Gavin's elbow lightly and asked about seating arrangements. He turned toward her, his entire demeanor softening instantly, and I felt like I was watching someone slip into a costume they wore only for certain people. Dinner passed in a blur of toasts and laughter, but beneath it all, an undercurrent pulled at my attention. Evelyn avoided being near me. Whenever I approached, she excused herself to talk to someone else or check something with them. Coordinator. She kept one hand lightly resting against her lower stomach, like she was bracing herself. Halfway through the evening, while guests moved to the dessert table, I stepped into the hallway to catch my breath. The noise inside was overwhelming. I leaned against the wall and pressed my fingers to my temples, trying to fight off the pounding ache building behind my